To talk to you about freedom from all limitation. And again, happy Cinco de Mayo. Now, I want to give you just a little background of Cinco de Mayo because a lot of people think, as we know here in America, that it's any excuse to have a fiesta, party, get together with friends, which is not a bad thing to do. But actually, it's one of the very minor things that Mexico even recognizes, and they barely recognize it at all. What they recognize basically is in September. So, what happened to create Cinco de Mayo? Well, there was this little country called France, and they decided that they were going to occupy part of Mexico. And the Mexican people said, no, don't think that's going to happen. So what happened is here comes the French under Napoleon III, and they're marching in into this little thing called the Battle of the Pueblo. And that happened in 1862. And so what happened is here was this big French army and this little bitty Mexican one. And they're looking at each other going, well, there's about 3 times them and 1 time of us. So how are we going to do this? So what happened is it started in the morning, and it was over by sunset. And the Mexicans had won. There were a lot more tragedies or a lot more deaths and casualties on the French side than there were on the Mexican side. And so, yes, it's a very minor battle. Their claim of independence is September 16th. So that's when they go crazy with their independence, like our July 4th. But the Battle of the Pueblo was a very, very minor event. Well, for me, if it's any kind of a conflict, it's pretty big, but not for these people. You know, it was interesting for them is they saw this huge French army coming at them, and yet they had this beautiful mindset of, we got this. That's not a problem. They didn't think of any type of limitation. They were small, but they were mighty, and they moved forward. So how many of us look at bigger pictures of things in our lives and we think, oh, I can't possibly do that. There's no way. But yet here's this little army that was 1 times less than 3 times the French, and they won. How is that possible? Well, I want to talk about this thing called the mind. The mind is a very powerful thing. So when you get a group of people, such as us right here, right now, and on Zoom, that have this beautiful, powerful mind of saying, I have no limitations. I have no blocks. I have nothing to get in my way. I get out of my way myself. And I can succeed, I can be victorious in whatever I set my mind to. And so that's what actually happened if we really want to pare it down. If these beautiful group of people said, no, not on this day you're going to do that. And so they moved forward. When we have freedom from our own limitation, we have a golden ticket to anything or everything that we want to open. We allow ourselves to be free from boundaries or whatever decides to throw a roadblock up. We can look that roadblock in the face and say, nah, just like they did, not today. Not today do you get to operate in my life. And so we will be victorious when we think through our minds and through our hearts. And we also have this little thing, well, it's not really a little thing, it's called visioning. When we can see the mental equivalent of an outcome, then we know there's no possibility for failure. We can't even look at a negative thought in that. Okay, so you're probably saying, well, Rev, what happens if things don't exactly work out to the way I've visualized them? Okay, we call that an adjustment. And we look at that and we say, all right, what is the higher yet to be? What is it that God wants for me that I am not listening to or what I'm not seeing? Because we sometimes become so focused, So focused on what the outcome is that we don't see the bigger picture. And God says in that little itty bitty voice, it says, this is where I'd like you to go. This is what I'd like you to see. And yet we say, you're right, whatever. Well, what is that? By us saying that to our higher self, we're putting up a limitation. We're saying no. Saying no to the divine? Really? Why do we want to say no to our divine self when there is so much that is to be learned? Why? Here's the big question. Why don't we take time to listen, to become quiet? When we have problems or we have, I'd say, challenges, I don't really like to use the word problems, we have these challenges that we say, well, help. How do I do this? And that inner divine core of us says, okay, let's look at this logically. Let's breathe. Let's look at every single step that was created for us to know about this. And yes, we do create our experiences. So when we look at things in the science of mind, what we're doing is we're looking at how things move and how things come together. It's an energy. It's all this wonderful, amazing energy that whirls around and swirls around and supports us. It's kind of like, I was thinking about what would be a good example. Okay, all kinds of plugs here. There's an outlet, there's an energy. You plug it in, it works. That's what happens when we plug into our divine self. When we plug into that unlimited energy, everything starts to materialize. Everything starts to work in divine order. Ernest Holmes says that thoughts are things. They have the power to objectify themselves. Thought lays hold of causation and forms real substance. The word of the human is the law of their life, under the one great law of all life. Thoughts of sickness can make a human sick, and thoughts of health and perfection can heal them. Wouldn't that be easy? Thought is the conscious activity of the one thinking and works as they direct through law, and this law may be consciously set in motion. I'm going to read that little bit again. Thought is the conscious activity of the one thinking and works as they direct through law, and this law may be consciously set in motion. When we accept that there is an energy, there is a universal presence that works for us, anything is possible. And then there's this little itty bitty thing called responsibility. When we accept full responsibility for whatever it is we want to create, that means that we are dedicating ourselves, we are committing ourselves, and we are definitely being loyal to the core on how things are going to progress. Now, I understand some of you will probably think, well, responsibility means that there's maybe this little thing called blame. Not necessarily. If you go to the blame game, then there's another block. You know, the reason in Science of Mind we don't have a devil is because we don't blame the devil. We don't blame that outer thing or shift the energies to say, well, the devil made me do it. Or whatever it is made me do it. What we in Science Mind say is, okay, I accept what it is that I created, and then we say, okay, now how do I get out of it? You can't solve it from the same energy that created it. So that's why you have to recognize the block and step away from it and understand, okay, these, as I was saying, these are the particles that came together to create whatever it is that is a challenge. And when you dissect it and when you take it apart and you go, oh, now I see what I did, then you can say, okay, I'm not going to do that again. This is something that I don't really want to work. I want it to work for me and not have the consciousness of what is against me. You know, sometimes when we do, well, sometimes, when we create blame, what happens is we create these immense walls that we build, and we're really good at making mortar to put those things together, and they are rock solid. Sometimes it's very hard to blast through. Some of these things that we build walls against, of course, are different types of relationships. They can be a work relationship, they can be marriage, they can be friends, whatever it is the relationship is. We create these blocks. And what those blocks are is basically not forgiving people, because, of course, we have to be right about everything. And when we consider ourselves right about whatever it is, don't you kind of experience a little bit of pain? Because you're constantly reliving whatever that is that happened. Most of us, because we're human, want closure. How do we create a successful closure to any situation? Well, I just happen to have 4 steps here that will help you. And it's an honorable closure. And the first step is to tell the old story in a new way, and the predominant quality of that step is gratitude. So here you have your old story that you have probably told the world and probably had a few polls on to make sure that you're right. And it continues to grow and grow, and it gets out of hand. And so then you're thinking, well, I'm right, they're wrong. And the divine self says, time out. Really? You want to claim that? So let's look at what it would feel like to forgive and give up that I have to be right, they were wrong in what they did to me. Well, let's look at the situation. You created it. Whatever it was, through communication or or involvement in whatever it was. And so what's happened is, here's the responsibility part. You bring it to yourself and you say, okay, yeah, I played a part in this. And I really feel ill of this person. So how do I create the forgiveness? You have to go within. Everything starts within. If you don't go within, you go without. You have to start from within, that divine self. The second step is to resolve any regrets that you may have with a willingness and humility. You resolve your regrets by owning them and learning from them. I know quite a few people in this life that have said, you know, I should have done this, or maybe I should have stayed there, or, you know, maybe I shouldn't have done what I did, because now that I'm living the outcome, I don't like it. And so what happens is then they look at, well, this person caused me to act this way. This person told me to do this. Okay, here's a psychological hint for all of you. When somebody approaches you in anger or whatever it is, and they say to you, you made me do this. You made me, see this, or you made, whatever it is, you made me is the key issue. I want you to replace it with, I made me. I made me do this. I made me whatever. Because that's truly what they're speaking to. They're speaking about themselves, but yet they're trying to deflect it and put it on you. So sometimes what happens is our way of working things out is to push it onto somebody else. Remember that devil guy? The responsibility? That's what we're doing. Is we're saying, well, I don't want to take it on, so they made me do this. No, they didn't. You made yourself do it. So there's some language. So if you ever want to know what somebody else is really thinking, just look at the words they use in that type of a phrase, and you will understand where they're coming from. And then, believe it or not, your heart can open, because now you are on common ground and you understand where their thinking is, where their head is at. The third step, y'all are going to like this one, is to let go of the past and let it be. Underlined. Let it go of the past and let it be. And the primary quality required is, again, forgiveness of yourself and others. The whole point of honorable closure is freeing up your energy and your spirit. Forgiveness isn't about the past. It's about the present. It's about the present. And the final step is to reinvent another story. And this time, the way you tell it is with joy. Because you've let go, you've let God, you know everything is taken care of, and that no longer can control you. Your old story can no longer limit you. It can no longer control you because you've already made peace with whatever it was. There's no limitations anymore. There's no more, well, I can't do this because. Ha! You can't. You can't have any more excuses for wanting or obtaining your higher good. Ernest Holmes said, every step of the way, God goes with us. So my question to you is, what kinds of future possibilities do you want to create and step into? Because if you look at the present instead of the past, what are the possibilities when you have a clear slate, you have nothing in front of you, and nothing to block this mind, this very powerful mind? It is important to understand that your current consciousness is more than your objective mental awareness. It is the sum of everything you ever believed and accepted to be the truth about yourself. One of my favorite stories is about Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years in jail. When he walked out, he said this: as I walked out the door toward my freedom, I knew that if I did not leave all the anger, hatred, and bitterness behind, that I would still be in prison. How many of us have been in a situation, relationship, whatever it is, and we are still in prison? You all hold the keys to that cell. When are you going to unlock it and let it go? We are the jailers of our mind. We are the ones that refuse to give it up. Why? Why can't you give it up? There is nothing there to support you except something to make you feel bad. How many of us want to feel bad on a daily basis? Ah, good. Okay. So, that's an agreement. Nobody wants to feel pain or suffering or in a bad mood every single day. Well, maybe I think there's maybe one or two on this planet, but I certainly know that this beautiful group here isn't. So let us let go of the I'm not enoughs, would'ves, should'ves, and could'ves. Those are in the past. The divine plan for all of us is freedom. Bondage is not God ordained, just so you know. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. That is what we're called here to be. is free. And free to be in a spiritual community, free to be in spiritual whatever you want to explore. It is that special relationship between you and your personal God. You know, Richard Rohr said, prophets are concerned above all with transformation and freedom of the heart. And then out of that free heart, the prophet says, listen. You know, we look at prophets as leaders. That's why there are so many different faith traditions, because everyone has a different idea and everyone has a different leader, which is wonderful. It's whatever we decide to resonate with. It's that within us that says yes. But there's also that small little word that I just mentioned, listen. The most important thing we have is to listen to that still small voice, which is God. Now, I found this funny, or not really funny, but I found this intriguing. Mark Twain said this. I had no idea he said this. Dance like no one is watching, sing like no one is listening, and love like you have never been hurt, and live like it's heaven on earth. They made a song about that, didn't they? If you have found God in your own mind, you have found the source of health, of freedom, and of the wisdom that answers all questions. No thing and no one holds the keys to your life. So if you've given the keys away to somebody, take them back. Take them back and say, you know what? I'm okay, you're okay, but I need to have my life the way I want it. And it's okay to do that. You know, Ricky Byers Beckwith, or no, I think it's Ricky Byers now, excuse me. She wrote a song about letting go. She said, there was a time in my life I thought I had to do it all by myself. Sounds familiar. And I didn't know the grace of God was sufficient. And I didn't know the love of God was at hand. But now I can say, if you are discouraged, struggling just to make it through another day, you've got to let it go. Let it all go. And this is what you have to say. I release and I let go. I let the Spirit run my life. And my heart is open wide. Yes, it's only up to God. There is no more struggle and there's no more strife. With my faith, I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, it's only up to God. And so it is. And so let us turn within for just a moment. Knowing that we release and we let go of all the old, that no longer serves us. And as we move forward in this beautiful, beautiful day, we know that there are no boundaries, there are no limitations, that we are a free spirit. We are free in that divine spirit, which is in our hearts and our minds. We have the power to shift and change our lives, to transform whatever is no longer working to working. And it is in this beautiful gift that God gives us, the divine power to shift and change, that we are all so grateful for. I know that as we leave here this afternoon, we feel energized. We feel like we can take on the world, and we know that whatever is been haunting us, that we have the ability to shift and change that as well. So it is with a grateful heart that I just release all of this and so much more to the presence of God, the divine, that supports each and every one of us, here and beyond. So grateful, and I accept it as being so, and so it is. Amen.